Hello students, welcome to the session on the course Post-Colonial Literatures, coded as BEGC 114. Today we are going to discuss the short story The Girl Who Can by Amata Aidoo. Now when you look at the title itself, The Girl Who Can, it tells you about the empowerment that is one of the themes that pervades the entire short story that you have in this unit. And this could have been the girl who should have or could have or would have, but it's not that, it's can, which speaks about the said girl's will and also her resilience. And it also is telling of the author's entire oeuvre and the kind of women she wanted to create and has created in her entire literary output. In fact, when you look at these lines, and these are excerpted from her longer poem, An Angry Letter in January, she says here, "I have been happy being me, an African, a woman, and a writer. Just take your racism, your sexism, your pragmatism off me, overt, covert, or internalized, and damn you." So just look at the ferociousness of these lines, and they are enough to indicate the kind of ferociousness with which Amata Aidoo and also her characters wore their identities on sleeves. But before beginning to discuss the story and the themes and the ideas that are there, it's very pertinent to look at the life that the giant Amata Aidoo has lived and what has she done throughout her entire career, because it gives an important peek into her shaping of the literary output as well. So Amata Aidoo was an author, activist, teacher from Ghana, Africa. Unlike Bessie Head, whom we discussed in the last session, she was born and brought up in a very progressive household where she received opportunities to explore her potential through education. Belonging to a matrilineal tradition, she grew up realizing the importance of a female authority and the transformation it can bring about in individuals' life and society at large. And therefore, many of the characters that she writes about, for example, take the short story The Girl Who Can, which is there prescribed for you. You can find such characters there, and we'll discuss about them in a while. Her upbringing also acutely made her aware of the political moorings of her society, the African society that she belonged to, and understand the predicaments of women in the culture she grew up. Even though she did not face those kinds of problems while growing up, she was sympathetic enough to understand what are the trials and tribulations that women go through. She had been hailed as one of the icons of African literature who has dedicated her entire oeuvre to delineate the lives of African women. Women hold a center stage in all her writings as they interrogate, challenge, and negotiate the various perceptions of womanhood present in their culture and society. She went on to become the Minister of Education and also taught at various universities. I've just mentioned two, University of Ghana and Brown University. Some of her critically acclaimed works are The Dilemma of a Ghost. It's a play that has been widely prescribed in the schools of Africa. And her landmark novel, her landmark debut novel, in fact, Our Sister Killjoy, or Reflections from a Black-Eyed Squint. And this can also be seen as seen in juxtaposition of Heart of Darkness, the novel by Joseph Conrad, where a man, a European man, travels into a dark island and country, and here a black woman, how she encounters the white culture, their ideas, their white supremacist ideas, and then how she tackles them. That's the entire novel about. And then you have this collection of poems, An Angry Letter in January, from where I read a little excerpt. Change is a love story. This novel went on to win Commonwealth Writers' Prize in 1992. And The Girl Who Can and the other stories, from where you are reading this particular short story. So this is what Amata Aidoo has been. Now, coming to what do we get to see in The Girl Who Can. So Amata Aidoo has always had a problem with the depiction of African women in world at large. The images, the stereotypical images of an African woman that goes around, gets publicized, gets marketed, and it's very much there in the media and the photojournalism part of it. She has, always contended to that. She has refused to fall into that picture that essentializes victimhood on the part of those women. And that is why she, says that in her article, in her essay, African Woman Today, she says that the image of the African woman in the mind of the world has been set. She is breeding too many children she cannot take care of, and for whom she should not expect other people to pick up the tab. She is hungry and so are her children. In fact, it has become a cliche of Western photojournalism that the African woman is old beyond her years. She is half naked, her drooped and withered breasts are well exposed. There are flies buzzing around the faces of her children, and she has a permanent begging bowl in her hand. And this is what she wanted to contend, that this is not a true picture. It may be a true picture for a lot of women who are reeling under poverty, under regressive conditions, under various other factors that are out there to crumble a person's life. But this is not the only picture. The women stand for their resilience, the women stand for their willpower and also the will to fight. And that is what she has portrayed in many of her stories. And novels, of course, entire literary output, in fact. So this generalized stereotypical portrayal, how it is being, fractured, and especially in the story that we are looking at today. So when you look at the story, you find at least 3 characters there. One is Aidoo, Nana, and Mammy. Now, Aidoo, you see, is a naive child narrator. Naive in quotation marks, because she's not... the naiveness gives her an agency to disrupt the already established patriarchal order and question it without introducing too much of a radical shock factor that comes with these kinds of questions generally. And that is probably why Nana can laugh at those questions, those really big questions. Had there been an adult narrator who has asked similar questions, she would have ousted from the society, or something really heinous would have happened to her. But she can laugh at those things because those questions are laughable. You're a child, you don't understand, but the questions are asked nonetheless, and that is the importance of this character there. So she is not just another girl living under, negative circumstances and not being able to think straight or think for herself or think for her future or the present condition for that matter. She is this introspective, retrospective, questioning girl who thinks about things and questions them. And in her innocence, in her naiveness, if one may term it for the lack of a better word, she asks this question that somehow, raises a question on us as a society, on, society at large as well, where she says that I don't know what to speak sometimes. When I say some things, people tell me to shut up and not to repeat, but then again, they also laugh at it and they want me to repeat those things. I'm just paraphrasing it. The quotation is right in front of you. So this is what you see, the inner workings of the mind of a child here, the girl child here. She could have been reduced to the same image that we talked about in a while ago, but she's not that. You're looking at the inner workings of her mind. Then you see Nana. Nana is just a product of patriarchy, just another product of patriarchy. She has internalized patriarchal notions. She is a woman who rules the roost with aplomb and shuts everyone up. But she's also, looking at the societal structures around her because she has internalized the patriarchal structure that is there around her, with which she has grown up, with which she has reared children, with which she has understood the world around her. She has never questioned it. And therefore, when the question, there is a slight challenge, there is a slight question on those, notions, either they become laughable or things that has to be hushed, not to be repeated at all. So when she looks at Aidoo's legs, what she is, she's questioning there is that her legs are not strong enough. She'll not be able to bear children. That's the anatomy of her, body, right? And then you have Mummy, who is said by Adjoa to be speechless in the story, but she is not without a voice. She has her opinion. That is what I mean, when I say voice here. She contends the incontestable Nana by pushing the cause for education for her daughter, for Adjoa. And she felt that had she been not locked, she was locked into some darkness because she didn't go to school. So the opportunity that she lacked, she wanted that opportunity for her daughter, so that her daughter can learn to read and write and make something good of her life, do something in life. And her legs are not thin and spindly. They are not too long for women, as Nana tagged them, but they are strong enough. And they need not to be, objectified in this manner that this particular body part of a woman is only, scrutinized and analyzed from that perspective, whether they are, fit enough for procreation or not, for carrying children or not. So she resists to that. She kind of promotes a cause for educating her child. So she's not been voiceless entirely, though from Adjoa's perspective, by the time she ends the narrative, she says that Mummy as usual has been, speechless, but she is not speechless. So look at these three characters and the kinds of, lives that they have, and as it is depicted through this girl child narrator's, perspective. You can see that at least these three through these three characters, the rupturing of the stereotypical image, and a lot of times these stereotypical images of an African woman are produced and circulated from a very Euro-American perspective. So that is what is getting fractured, and one of the ideas or the premises on which the post-colonial literature rests is when we try to create a space for the narratives that are coming from within, and also at the same time they fracture the narrative which is very Eurocentric or Euro-American centric, as we are talking about. So here through these three characters, and we're just looking at a short story, if we look at the entire oeuvre, we find hundreds of women who are doing the same thing. So the questioning, the challenging, the contending, it's very much happening there. And these women are not brainless creatures with a begging bowl in their hand. Getting to another point, now for Amahata Aidoo, the idea of feminism and anti-colonialism should go hand in hand. They are not devoid of each other, and she says that there in African Woman Today, and the essay that I quoted from a while ago, she says that when people ask me rather bluntly every now and then whether I am a feminist, I not only answer yes, but I go on to insist that every woman and every man should be a feminist, especially if they believe that Africans should take charge of our land, its wealth, our lives, and the burden of our own development. Because it is not possible to advocate independence for our continent without also believing that African women must have the best of that environment can offer, right? You get independence, you have the ability to control your the economy of the country, you develop the ability to manage your entire society and political affairs and other things. But if it's only benefiting one half of the population, then what's the point of it? That is what she is questioning, and it's a very big question that Amahata Aidoo has held as a primary perspective that has pervaded all her literary works. So and that is probably why she's also putting women at center stage in her novels, short stories, plays, and poems also. And that is why she's asserting their identities in the manner she did in the first few lines I just quoted in the beginning of this session. So she says that for some of us, this is the crucial element of our feminism. So the feminism she offers has to have the surety for women that they will also be able to avail the best of the environment that would be bettered with the arrival of the independence and the process of what we have called as decolonization. Because in the story also, what you also see is that there is an entire decolonized setup. If I can think about the setup in which the story is situated in these terms, it's a self-sustained household of women alone, and where the future of womanhood is growing up to achieve her potential while also initiating change in her environment. This ensures the best of the environment that she talked about in a while ago, not only for the girl in the story, but also presents a possibility of rupturing the seemingly invincible. The invincible that has been internalized by Nana, the regressive patriarchal structure around her. So the rupture, the challenge, the presenting of the possibility is something that Aidoo has envisioned with the anti-colonial perspective that goes hand in hand with the kind of feminism that she is nurturing in her literary output. Now, Bell Hooks, American author, essayist, scholar, teacher, she in her essay Sisterhood, Political Solidarity Between Women, and it's very important and pertinent to look at what she thinks about sisterhood here, because she's dissecting, scrutinizing, and also redefining the idea of sisterhood, which has basically just rested on the common notion of shared suffering, shared pain, and common joys and sorrows that have been there, so that women come and share those stories, and it's in the victimhood that women find some sort of relief when they bond on that factor. But when Bell Hooks talks about sisterhood, she is contending this very idea that it should not be basically the common victimhood or common pain that should bind women together, but it should be common strength. And that is why she, writes here. She says that the idea of common oppression, why she, questions the idea of common oppression. She says the idea of common oppression was a false and a corrupt platform disguising and mystifying the true nature of women's varied and complex social reality. Women are divided by sexist attitudes, racism, class privilege. And this is what we were referring to when we talked about Stevanism and the challenge to Euro-American definition of feminism in the last session when we were discussing Bessie Head. So women are divided by these many things. Sustained women bonding can occur only when these divisions are confronted. So either you can put a cover on it and say that because there's a common oppression we are binding together, or you can introspect the system that's there and then talk about how there is an inherent classism also. She has not mentioned that, but classism also, classism, casteism, if we bring the concept closer to home, all of that, is very much there, and it works irrespective of gender. And that is what is not tackled when we think of sisterhood only in terms of common oppression. And this is what she is, referring to. So she says that, and she says that if we are looking at a sustained woman bonding, a sisterhood that will long last, that will survive, that will be there, and it is important for it to be there because there has to be some solidarity, then you need to tackle these questions. Sisterhood that just comes as an emotional appeal, it's an incomplete thing, and it's a very wishy-washy thing, because it is just a cover-up. And she says that, these are her words, cover-up, hiding the fact that many women oppress other women. And you see that in the story also. Nana, who is a matriarch of the family, but she has internalized, as I spoke about, that the idea of patriarchy so much that it's very difficult for her to even think about what Aidoo can do. I mean, she goes to the school and confirms whether she is actually participating as an athlete and is winning those competitions or not. And when she is confirmed, she is elated. Her elation, her pride that happens in the story is something that is that can be possible only when a woman writes those narratives. I mean, it could have ended in a narrative that would have ended with either the death of Aidoo's dreams, or something shattering would have happened. I mean, if you look closer to the home, an Odia short story, which is very much there in one of the courses that you are offered, Fakir Mohan Senapati's Revati. I mean, there's a little girl who is her first generation girl going to school, and because she studies, the grandmother has held that notion that she shouldn't be studying. No girl studies in her family, and it hasn't happened for a generation. She goes to school, and then pestilence breaks in the village, and then everybody dies, and she also dies. So this heart-wrenching end to the story with no moral at all. I mean, or in fact, the negative moral, if you can take out a moral at all from that story. I mean, of course, when Senapati was writing, that was he can be categorized as a social realist, and that's what he's depicting. It's also a reality. But if we just look at the story and what kind of message or moral it's imparting, this is something that we can think of, and it is a food for thought. Anyway, coming back to the point, sisterhood as an emotional appeal is a cover-up, and therefore, women who oppress women, this kind of gets hidden. Women are enriched when we bought with one another, but we cannot develop sustaining ties or political solidarity using the model of sisterhood created by bourgeois women's liberationists. The idea of sisterhood that just works on the common oppression, it's a very bourgeois white woman liberationist perspective. And therefore, she kind of carries on this idea that bonding that is based on victimization directly reflects male supremacist thinking. And this is very important here, right? I mean, where the sexist ideology teaches you that if you're a woman, you have to be a victim. Otherwise, there would not be a possibility for you to kind of, understand what's going on with you. We would no longer accept a simple, and she says there that we no longer accept a simplistic good girl, bad boy account. It's a very simplistic, account when we talk of feminism. That's why feminism also a larger part is resisted, in that way, because these are the two kinds of categories that are, being created. So she says there that, we are not going to accept this good girl, bad boy account of the structure of sexist oppression, because we can resist male domination. We must, before we can resist that, we must break our attachment to sexism, which is very much there inside women. We must work to transform female consciousness, working together to expose, examine, and eliminate sexist socialization within ourselves. Women would strengthen and affirm one another and build a solid foundation for developing political solidarity. So when you look at this short story, the elimination of sexist socialization, how is it happening in this story? And that is why I brought this concept of sisterhood as Bell Hooks is studying it. That when you kind of look at the character of Nana particularly, and what she's imparting, because she herself has been socialized in a very sexist way in the patriarchal society, deeply patriarchal society that she has lived in. And she is trying to impart the same to Aidoo. She has done that, though it's not very evident in the story, but she has done that, because you see when the mother says that she has not been given the opportunity to go to school. I mean, there could be other factors, but there could be one of the reasons is that if she had the reservation, because in the society that doesn't happen really. We have talked about that short story a while ago. So that kind of, sexist socialization has to be examined and eliminated. And this particular short story is a study of how sisterhood can be forged. I mean, irrespective of the familial bonds that these three characters share. I mean, we are looking at the three characters that are sharing the intergenerational bond and bondages. Bondages because they are all tied to their gender at some or the other level. That exposes and examines ways in which sisterhood of hope, and that is why I call it sisterhood of hope, because Ajwa herself stands for hope, and she becomes a rallying point for all of them, for Mama, for Mami, for Nana, for Ajwa herself. These their victimization would have been personal, but that never becomes a thread that allows you to sew all these three characters together. And that is the beauty of this story. So that is all for today. I hope you read the story and try to look at the story with this particular perspective and enrich the understanding. Thank you for being a patient listener. Have a good day.